Hi everyone, hello and welcome once again to the Power Platform series. The last video we had our guest, Yu, who walked us through a very interesting session, very expository, as she guided us through the different app components. We want to build Power Apps from the beginning. What should you start with? The requirement gathering, she mentioned the functional and non-functional, the need for you to have a workshop or at least find a way to document the requirements, and the outcome of that should be something that you can pen down. Okay, this is what I want to get at the end of this application that we're building. She also talked about a few things around, themes, colors, accessibility. I learned a lot. How I often neglect building an accessible application and how you can pay attention to that. She mentioned why we need to do some sort of wireframe so that will help you sort of guide to see, okay, these are the flows of the application and this is how the screen get connected to one another. And lastly, we ended that session with tools that can help you to achieve that. We have the PowerPoint, we have the Adobe XD, we have the Mirror, we also have even, pen and paper. You can use pen and paper on your board so you understand what you're doing. It is a great honor to have Yu again with us today. Of course, I'm always loyal to the Microsoft MVP, and she's been doing this whole lot, the support she gives to the community. So I welcome you once again, Yu.
Thanks, Ola. I'm so happy to be back. I've learned a lot from you from the last session as well. Just before I start, I just want to say we don't plan the clothes. We just so happen to wear it. Great mind thinks alike.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's
All
fun.
right.
So
Okay,
today we want to talk about Power Platform governance. Do you want to share a thought before we move into the session?
Yeah, so governance is I want to say it's a very big topic. Everyone's talking about governance now. There's a lot of articles, documents that you can read about governance. So honestly, half an hour is not enough to go through everything. So what all am I going to do today is just to have a high level, to give you a high level understanding what all this governance is all about. Have you have some understanding of what thought process that you need to put in when you want to implement Power Platform? Because governance is not just something that comes in before the project, or it's something that goes throughout from end to end. Even during BAU process, you need governance so that you can monitor what is the amount of apps in your organization. You can make sure that your data application is secure. You can automation process, so you can minimize the IT team's workload. You can have teamings created, so all your apps built are as per the organization's theme. There's nurturing features that you can have, where you can actually have kind of like a community within your organization itself, to kind of encourage and empower everyone to build apps. So one reason why it's very important is because now everyone can build apps. So you, as an organization, you should allow everyone in the organization to build apps, but you can't just have everybody building apps and no one's monitoring it. Like there needs to be some sort of rules, and not rules, some sort of like a practice put together, and everyone follows the practice to make sure that everything is is organized, and you know what you're able to know what you're doing. You don't have like end up with 500 apps and 30 repeated apps. You don't want that to happen, right? So that's why we all need to have governance in place, and this is something that every organization is taking it very seriously. And if you haven't have one in your current organization, don't freak out or anything. You can implement it now. So yeah, so Ola, back to you.
All right, thank you so much for that intro. So, she's basically explained to us why governance is very important. But will you talk through this point for us again? Because personally, for me, I have experience around governance. I'm not saying I'm an implementer, but like I started with adoption. When it comes to Power Platform, the passion was there. I just want to build applications. I just want to create solutions. I was doing that. I never knew that I have to govern it. I never knew that there's a need, to have an oversight view of what is being created, what are the numbers of flows, any throttling limit, any limitations to move out, just to monitor what is happening and how information and flows are moving across the organization. So from your experience, why do you think governance is important?
So like what you mentioned just now, right? If we always need to monitor, like the one point you said, you want to monitor what the flows and what the apps in your governance. So in your organization, don't take this as trying to micromanage the users. I know some people be like, oh, are you micromanaging the people who are building apps? It's not that way. It's because when you have a Power Apps, Power Platform, or maybe Dynamics or Office 365 tenant, it all ties to licensing, there's storage, there's capacity. So you want to know how much storage there is. Like you want to know if you're buying premium connectors, right? Do you need the premium connectors? Is someone actually building app connecting from one tenant to another tenant? Is someone using connectors they are not supposed to use? So all these are really important. You want to audit the apps that are there, because sometimes maybe the app is not useful anymore. You might want to turn it off, or no one is using. You want to know what is the usability rate. You want to know if your license is going to expire. You don't want to wake up one day and like, shit, nothing works anymore in my organization. So that is why we all need to audit and have insights on the flow and apps across all environment. And then you need to make sure your data application is secure, because data security is very important, right? So you don't want your data to leak or go outside of the environment. You don't want it to leak out from your organization. You don't want people to misuse your data. And lastly, automation process. Now you can do a lot of automation, right, with Flow. Like you can even automate a creation of environment. IT at the moment, they should focus on critical projects, big projects, not business users apps that they built for their business unit. You don't want them to need to deploy it for you, and there is some form of assistance that is required, but not like an end-to-end critical project kind of thing where you go like pushing the app from dev to prod. Things like that could all be automated. So it kind of allowing IT team to focus on only critical projects that impact the organizations, and then you can leave the business user to build apps that can do like need every day. Like for example, the appraisal app. You don't need IT team to spend 50 days to do that. Someone could just build it in maybe 2 weeks. So with all this governance in place, that can happen, and IT team can do their own thing. We're not saying, with governance, IT, you don't need IT anymore. We need IT. That's why they have to manage the governance.
True.
They are the governance, but we are not micromanaging the people as well. It's just allowing everyone to be able to do what they need to do in a proper process, in a streamlined manner, so you don't cause like haywalk everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you for emphasizing that, especially the understanding that governance does not mean micromanaging. In fact, it is to help the business continue to run the way it should run. Take, for example, you have a storage limit. You have a storage limit, and nobody is monitoring what percentage has been used up, and should we upgrade? That way, the day the storage limit is reached, it can cause all applications to stop functioning, and that can cause business disruptions, and it can cost the company money or time, and you can always tie that to efficiency. Okay, so thank you so much for this part. We can see why governance is actually much more important. So talking about admin and governance best practice, what will you say around it?
So this is all actually recommended by Microsoft. So there is 3 main components: manage, secure, monitor, and alert. So these are 3 components of governance. So let's look at the first one first, okay? We talk about managing. So when we talk about managing, there are a few questions that you need to ask. First of all, who is the Power Platform admin? Someone has to be a Power Platform admin. So what Power Platform admin does, they're able to create environment. They're able to share the app to users. They are able to assign license. They are able to build apps. So it's like having a system administration, right? So you need a Power Platform admin. Then who are the users and what is their role? So again, this depends on your organization structure. So we are talking about organizations with citizen developer and organizations where there's only IT that are building the apps, right? So if there's only IT building the apps, then it's just IT guys. But if you have users that will build the app as well, do you allow every user to build the app or just a group of users? We call them power users. Do you allow every business unit to build the app, or just one person from every business unit to build the app and the rest of them are just guests that is using the app? So that is something to be thought about. And thirdly, which license is the most cost effective? So licensing, very big topic, right? Do you buy per app license, per user license? How you go about your flow licensing? Again, this is all depending on needs. How many users you have in your organization, how many people be using the app, how much you're getting per app. Are you getting a discount from Microsoft? Are you paying, if you have more than, at the moment, but licensing is changing, right? So at the moment, I think it's a half price now. It's only $5 per app or something. So is it more cost effective to buy per app, or is more cost effective to pay per user? How much storage do you need? Do you upload a lot of attachment, or is it just data? So currently it comes with, I can't remember how many storage it comes with. Do you remember, Ola? Can't remember on top of my head.
The one for Dataverse for Teams comes with 2 gig storage.
Yeah. So you have to be very conscious about how you use your 2 gig storage, because 2 gig is obviously not a lot. You need to buy extra storage, right? And then there's the environment strategy. This is a whole big topic. How you want to set up your environment. Do you want to have the full-fledged where you have dev, test, UAT, prod? Or do you want to do shared environment? Because you might have IT users building app, you have business users building app. So you have like shared UAT and prod environment, but you have 2 development environment. One for business users and one for IT. Again, this comes back to costing, right? When you share environment, you minimize the use of capacity and etc. So that is environment strategy, which is a whole topic that we'll talk about later on in the slide. And then from environment strategy, you'll make decisions about other related things, like is ALM required. So ALM is application life cycle management, which is if you have a full-fledged dev, test, prod, then you need to have a DevOps pipeline. You need to have a structure on how to do your application. Maybe it's a 2-week sprint. Every 2 weeks, you have new feature get deployed. But obviously, if you're talking about just one environment, just using, maybe you have a very small team. The IT is the only person building it. You're just one person building the app, no one else using it. Then maybe you just need to use the default environment. If you use default environment, then there's no deployment, then you don't need ALM, right? So this all links back to the environment strategy. And depending on the environment strategy, you'll come up with your DLP strategy as well, which is the data loss policy. So data loss policy is to manage the connectors, who can use what connectors. If you're familiar with Azure, there's the business, I think it's called the business group, non-business group, and block. So you can block certain connectors from being used by the users. You can
DLP.
You can classify, yes, DLP. Yeah, so you can classify them. That helps you keep your data secure, your environment secure. So that brings us to the second category, which is secure. So one reason to have governance is to have a secure environment, right? So we've spoken about DLP strategy. Then now we also need to ask, do you need Azure AD Conditional Access, which means how are they accessing it? Maybe some people could access the app directly, single sign-on. Maybe some people require special route to get access to the app, depending on what role they have. Are they accounting or are they auditing? They might have different way of accessing the app. And then is cross-tenant isolation required? So cross-tenant isolation is for any organization who have multiple tenants. If let's say Elaine have access to multiple tenants, it also means that Elaine can connect data from one tenant to another tenant. Do you want to allow that to happen, right? You want a two-way, or you don't allow it at all? Because sometimes you might have sensitive data in another environment, environment B, and you don't want to bring it to environment A. So these are some of the things that you think about, especially like for you, Ola, you're working in an insurance company. I'm sure data is very sensitive there, right? So yeah, you don't want everyone to be accessing every data because we're talking about people's personal information. So there might be a breach of data policy that that will come in place. So these are some things that you think about when you set up your environments. Lastly, we're talking about monitoring and alert, which we keep mentioning again and again since the start, how important this is, right? So at the moment, there's a like Microsoft keep making it better and better. So now we have the out-of-box analytics, which is the tenant level analytics. You can turn it on from the Power Platform Admin Center. I've tested this out. It's really cool. Like you're able to see and filter all the apps and flows that's been used, for example, for duration, like the past 30 days. You can drill down. You can export it as Excel file. You can see tables, like it's all in graph, and you can drill down to see the data in tables. It's a Power BI. It looks like a Power BI. Basically, all the function is there. Yeah. And you have also the self-service analytics in Azure that is coming. And lastly, I cannot emphasize more is installing CoE Starter Kit, because that helps you with the whole governance component. So this is Microsoft recommendation. You can find all of these in Microsoft Docs. I'll pass the link to Ola so he can share with you guys. And every of the points I put here, Microsoft actually have a write-up for it, so you can read it in more detail.
All right. Thank you so much. I mean, you broke this down and it's really, really clear. The best practices about managing, about securing, monitoring, and alert. And you mentioned some of those things here, especially the CoE, which I think the next slide, we soon talked about the CoE. But before that, just to mention that the pricing, Microsoft by October 1st, the Power Apps pricing plan has been slashed by 50%.
Yes.
So making it more affordable for organizations. And that means more jobs, more applications to be created. It's really promising.
Yeah. I think it will attract a lot more people to use Power Apps with the drop order license. So thank you, Microsoft.
Yeah, thanks, Microsoft. By the way, this is not a Microsoft sponsored show.
No.
But of course, we are saying thank you because it's becoming more affordable and people can then benefit from the Power Platform.
Yeah. So now we look at environment strategy, right? So I mentioned just now, environment strategy is very important. So what I put together here is just a short checklist. Again, this very high level overview of the checklist. So based on this checklist, you will design your environment. This is a whole process itself. When we talk about governance, it's a whole process. It's between you and the IT team sitting down and putting all this together. You have to start it right so that moving down the road is easy, because if you don't get your environments right, then you have to start doing migration and copy and all the stuff will come in, all the overheads will come in. So the first thing in the checklist is define level of app complexity. So what kind of app are we talking about? Productivity, important, or critical? So productivity, we're talking about apps that users are building, business users themselves, just individual user apps that is built for their business unit or their team. For example, like the employee appraisal app. Maybe it's just a small app. It doesn't take more than 30 days to build. So things like this, these are simple stuff, right? Is the organization only building all these simple apps, or is it important? Important means pretty big projects, end-to-end solution kind of thing. We're not just talking about building an app. Maybe there's integration, there's data warehouse, data lake, there's Power BI, a lot more to it. It takes about maybe 30 to 3 months to deploy. It involves IT, IT have to sit in. There's a developer per se, not just a business user building the app. And then there's also an important also in that category, it could also be a shared, like kind of like IT building apps, and then you have business user building apps as well. So there's a few different roles of people building the apps, but they're all medium-sized apps, medium complexity apps. So that's for the important. And lastly is critical. We're talking about very large projects, maybe a transformation project. IT, you have vendors doing it. You have multiple different parties running it, multiple different systems, big integration. You need proper environments. You need to move from dev. You need to go through UAT process. Basically, a whole end-to-end. So that is critical. So that's the first one in the checklist. Second one is, what is your environment capacity? Like all I probably mentioned just now, if they only have teams, it's just 2 gig, that automatically probably just falls into productivity. It's probably not important or critical, right? It might be important, but it's not for the critical category. Thirdly, is there a centralized IT managing the app development? This relates back to what I mentioned in the first point. So do you have an IT team that is managing this app, that is building this app, or it's just maybe an organization where it's just all the app makers building it? That again is something that you probably have to think about, and it's IT running the project, right? And lastly, how are you communicating this strategy to the business users? So this is very important, because business users, they are app makers, they need to know what is your environment strategy. If there is a process from dev to UAT, then they need to know when they need to complete in dev, when need to push to test, when they need to retest it, when does it go into production. They need to know the life cycle. Even if you're just in one environment, you still need to let the user know what they can build in the environment, how much capacity they can use, what they can connect with. Can they build flows? Are you allowing them to build any flows to connect to external environments? So just things like this, you have to communicate to your business users. They have to know, there have to be transparency.
Fantastic.
So there are some of my checklists. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I'm definitely going to work with this checklist, because I'm at the verge of implementing something similar to this in my organization. So it's very helpful. Thank you so much. And if you have 1 or 2 questions, please feel free, as you're watching this video, post it in the comment section. We'll take time to answer and then get back to you. Still on environment strategy.
Yeah, so coming back this now on my first point on the checklist, right? What kind of project it is defines what kind of environment strategy that you need to put in place. So let's start with the minimum, which is the productivity. So everyone is just app maker. You can just use the default environment. You don't need a whole fancy, complicated process of deploying from dev to prod, because they're just building app and enhancing app for their own business unit. The second strategy we have is important projects. So this is where you probably have a medium-sized kind of project, medium kind of app, probably take about 30 days to 2-3 months to build, and it's both IT and IT developers, or we call them Power Apps developers, and also the business user building it. So what we propose here, what according to Microsoft, this is all Microsoft best practice, by the way. So Microsoft proposed for you to have 2 dev environment, one separate for business users, one separate for IT developers, because as of now especially, right, only one person can go in and edit the app. You can't have multiple person editing the app. So each of them have the app, and then you share the test, UAT, and production. So this kind of minimize your cost and minimize your capacity and such as well. So you still need a deployment process. So it's like probably maybe you say every month we deploy it to test, and then you need to have dedicated user to test it, and then you push it to UAT, and then finally to production, a whole life cycle. And the top one is this, we're talking about critical projects, right? We're talking about app developer in your organization building end-to-end solutions, probably take 6 months to 1 year, to $1 million project, integrating to 10 systems, so you need a proper environment. You probably end up with 50 solutions going through, things like this. So these are critical big projects, transformation project. So you have dev, test, UAT, prod. Obviously, like in many of my projects, when it's critical, you probably have more than 4 environment. You probably end up with dev, test, UAT, SIT, prod, demo environment, things like that. So again, how many environments you have depends on your organization. We are not saying that you always need to have dev, test, UAT, prod. Maybe you only need to have dev, test, and prod, or maybe you need to have more. Maybe you need to have UAT 1, UAT 2. It really depends. Maybe you not just have one BU dev. Maybe every BU will have a dev environment. so they don't share the dev environment, right? Because then it'll be easier for you to monitor as well. What we're saying is that this is what Microsoft proposed that you do. You can take this model and tweak it based on your organization needs.
True. Thank you. So very clear. You talked about this different role before. You call it level of app complexity, and right now you are showing us the kind of environment proposed by Microsoft, which makes it more clearer. When you are building productivity-related app by business users, let them do that in a default environment. There might be no need to create more than one environment. But when the app complexity is moving from productivity to important projects, you then need to make more room for different environments, just so that you can deliver the best possible solution. And if it is a critical one, of course, we can see the proposal as well. As she has rightly said, this can be modified to suit your organization's need, but it's a good way to start. Right, thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes. So when you have a important or critical environment strategy, you need a application lifecycle implementation management kind of thing. So this is something I put up based on my knowledge and what I read on Microsoft documentations on what are the steps you need to put together to have a healthy, defined as a healthy application lifecycle management. So the first one is I think there is plan. So it's a bit small. Plan and implement your environment. Yeah, this is plan and implement environment is what we spoke about previously. So that is, plan how many environments you have, whether it's dev test UAT or just dev UAT prod. Dev test UAT prod or dev UAT prod. So you have to plan it out. And then plan it out, create it, configure it. And then next you have to implement the AD security group. So you know how in Power Apps, all the users are put into security group, and the security group is used to assign to the app. So why this is, you already have your users in security group, but why we actually recommend that you assign the security group to the app instead of manually assign every user is so that if you want to remove them, you just remove the group and everyone is removed. And how you set up security group is based on their roles. So if the app has 3 different group of users with 3 different security roles, like 3 different access and privilege to the data of the app, then you'll probably create 3 security groups, if that makes sense, Then next one is to set up the CoE toolkit. We'll touch more on CoE toolkit later. So this is a free toolkit that you can set up to manage and govern your environment. Next one is to create a solution and publisher. So obviously to move all your apps and flows from one environment to another, you have to use a solution. Always have one solution and one publisher. That's the best practice. There's this is the whole conversation about what is the best practice of solution creation, and all, which I don't want to delve into today. But we can talk about it further. We can discuss it in the chats and comments. And after that, we have to set up the DevOps project and pipeline. So this is to automate the pushing of your solution from one environment to another. So instead of manually, exporting the solution, exporting from dev, import to test, export from test, export to UAT, you can use this pipeline, click a button, and it gets pushed across to every environment. You can also set up approvals. It looks like a flow. So you can say if you want to deploy to production, you need to get approval from someone. And you can put a schedule to say like every 2 weeks deploy to test. And it's easier to manage the errors and stuff as well. Like you could actually see the list of errors, if there's any, why it cannot be deployed, you can debug from there. Then nextly is to install the Power Platform build tools. Again, this assists in the whole automation of the solution pushing from dev to production. Then next, what you do is you create the app within the solution. So the first five, 1, 2, 3, the first 6 steps here, these are like one-time setup. Okay, so once you have the solution, you're the publisher, you create the app, put the app into the solution, or you can create flow as well, put the flow into solution. Any additional requirements, that any additional customizations that you have built, PCF, etc., put it in the solution, and then you create a deployment pipeline in DevOps. You push the solution, and then you can grant access to the app. So this is what I call recurring process, because you might not be creating app, you might be updating the app, you might be adding more components. So every time you go through a deployment, you have to put all this into a solution and you push it across the environment. And then lastly, ongoing one, of course, is support. So that's a very long, lengthy application life cycle, but that kind of gives you a picture on how this whole ALM works. Ola,
thank you so much. I mean, I was practically learning. I was learning, and I was seeing how you can make truly and healthy ALM implementation, which is application lifecycle management. And I believe now it is more clearer why you even need to plan them from the beginning and why you need to manage it. By the time you start thinking of different application complexity, you then have to deal with the environment. Then the thought is, how can I manage the entire process? And that is why we are talking about this. Do you mention that the Center of Excellency Toolkit is free?
Yes, you can download it from GitHub. I've left the link in the slide. I also will send you so you could share it to the folks. Yeah.
All right, awesome. So, but do you need license?
For Center of Excellence?
Yes.
No, it's just a solution. You download and you import it into your environment. So you create a separate CoE environment. You can name it whatever, a separate environment. You download the CoE toolkit, then you import it in, and then you configure it. So you can configure all your environment parameters, and then you can add in whatever components that you want into the CoE based on your needs. So I think there's 5 or 6 components, which I have it in the next few slides, and I think you can pick and choose. This is just an overview of what you have in the CoE toolkit. So you have the core component, which is what you're going to install. It comes with the flow. It comes with you're able to set up environment variables, and then you have the governance, which help you to monitor your environments. Basically, all the governance stuff that we talk about. There's also the nurture components for you to empower your users, knowledge sharing. And then there's the ALM part, which we have covered about the DevOps and the teaming. So I really love this teaming component because, like we've mentioned in the last session, it's very painful to set up teamings for your app. If you build 50 apps, you got to set up, even if you use reusable components, you got to keep setting it up again. You can now use CoE Toolkit to set up a teaming and apply it to all your apps in all the environment. And lastly, innovation backlog is for you to keep track of what are the backlog items that you want to build, or ideas. People can contribute ideas on how to improve your app. So highly recommend that you install the CoE Toolkit. It's free. Just download it from GitHub. There's the whole Microsoft Docs step-by-step on how to install it, and you're kind of set. This is where you get started.
True. I mean, if you want to go the governance way, it's better to have the Center of Excellence Toolkit, because it makes that possible much more than governance, including the nurturing, the ALM we talked about today, and all that Elaine has shared with us here under this series. So thank you so much, Elaine. It's been a really always an expository and exciting time. In case you have not consumed the first video where we discuss what you need to look at when you are building a Canvas app, including requirement gathering and few other components, please, you can see the link in the video right now in the description section. Click on it and consume that part. That was the part 1. This is the part 2, which we are dealing with the solution governance, as well as all the other components that Elaine has shared with us today. The next series of videos we deal with building our use case application, and how can we factor in some of the learnings and the things we picked up from this whole video series to building a simple yet functional application. I'm also going to drop right here Elaine's YouTube channel. I'm going to encourage that you follow her more. You can chat her up. Of course, you can connect with her on LinkedIn. I believe you are hoping for connection on LinkedIn, right,
Yes.
Elaine?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I am. So thanks a lot, Ola, for inviting me again. Had lots of fun in this series. I hope you guys learned something today. Feel free to leave comments. Feel free to challenge some of the things I said as well, because like I mentioned, everyone have different experience. Everyone have done this differently. It'd be great to know what is the way how other people are doing things. So feel free to just put it on the comments and we'll respond, and we can continue the discussion over there.